So the Blackhawks unsuccessfully defend their title from last year in the Traverse City Prospects Tournament. They go 2-2, finishing in 4th place out of 8 teams. It's a Prospects Tournament. It really doesn't mean all that much. Unless we win like we did last year, then it means something. But even though they did finish middle of the pack and a little disappointing in that regard, they did beat the St. Louis Blues Prospects with an overtime goal from Dylan Sikura, and in the end, that's really all that matters. Hi, my name is Clay. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to my channel if you've never been. Welcome to Hockey Talkie, and welcome to the 2018 Chicago Blackhawks Prospect Pyramid video. Now, before I begin, I need to shout out my latest Patreon supporter, Andrew Jakubczak, which, if I butchered that last name, I apologize, Andrew. But I want to let you know, and I want everyone else to know, that you are seriously awesome for going above and beyond to support me and be a super fan of this channel. He gets access to some behind-the-scenes content. If that's something that interests you and you'd like to go above and beyond to support me in this channel, there's a link to my Patreon page down below. Check it out. If you're unfamiliar with the prospect pyramid concept, it's basically a methodology popularized by Steve Dangle, who does YouTube videos on the Toronto Maple Leafs. You know who he is. But instead of ranking prospects in a very granular fashion, 1 to 25, which doesn't really make any sense because you're essentially trying to predict the future with prospects. Instead, you just group them into tiers in basically the shape of a pyramid. So you got your top level prospects, your elite prospects at the top, and you just group them into tiers and you go all the way down so you get all the way through them. So most of the prospect pyramids you'll find out there are all kind of done on like a whiteboard, such as the one behind me, or a piece of paper, or some sort of physical, tangible surface. I'm going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be fancy. I'm going to do my prospect pyramid on the virtual computerized screen that you're watching this video on. So here we go. I'm just kidding. I'm going to Photoshop it. But let's begin. Starting it off with tier number 1, the top tier of the prospect pyramid, the Chicago Blackhawks have 0 prospects in that tier. You see, the top tier is reserved for the elite prospects. Guys like Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane back in the day. Guys like Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, Jack Eichel. Guys like Rasmus Dahlin. The Blackhawks don't have an elite prospect like that. So, nobody in tier number 1. Let's go down to tier number 2. In tier number 2, these are prospects that are projected to be impact players in the NHL for your team. And in the Blackhawks case, they have 2 of these players in Adam Boqvist and Dylan Sikura. Adam Boqvist, the number 8 overall draft pick for the Hawks this past June. He's 18 years old. It's going to be a couple years before he makes the NHL. But from everything we've seen of him, he's got everything you want out of a defenseman. He's calm, cool, collected. He has the skills. Once he makes it into the NHL, he is going to be a solid core piece for the Hawks. He will be an impact player on the blue line. And of course, Dylan Sikura, who we signed late last year after he was done with his season in the NCAA, very similar to John Hayden and Nick Schmaltz in that regard. But Dylan Sikura, regarded by some as the best college player in the nation, he has the skills, he has the ability to put up points, and that's what he's going to do. Top 6 winger, playing alongside guys like Alex DeBrincat, Patrick Kane, Nick Schmaltz, Jonathan Toews, Brandon Saad, guys like that. He is going to put up points, and he is very much a bright spot in the future of the Hawks. Moving on down to tier number 3. This is a tier where they may not be impact players, but these guys are going to make the NHL, and they're going to be solid supporting cast members of the team. In this tier, we have Jake Wise, Nicholas Bodin, Henry Jokiharju, Ian Mitchell, and Victor Edsel. Jake Wise, 3rd round draft pick by the Hawks this past June. In fact, he was the 69th overall draft pick, which makes him a very nice prospect for the Blackhawks to have. He is a skilled centerman and a very smart player, loves his hockey. He's a guy who has the tools to be a solid 3rd line center, maybe even bumping up to a second line if there are injuries or matchups or anything like that. I think he can fit that role. I think he has the tools to do it, and that's why he is in this tier. Nicholas Bodine, the other first-round draft pick for the Hawks this past June, draft pick that we got from the Nashville Predators in that Ryan Hartman trade. And so far this summer, he's been trying to let everyone know not to forget about him. He's made the best first impression of any Blackhawks prospect so far. He has looked absolutely fantastic. And with him being regarded as one of the most pure passers in the draft, he fits very well into Coach Q's system of using the stretch pass to get the puck up and out of the defensive zone. He could be a very, very solid defenseman for the Hawks, especially if he continues to play like he's played so far and continues to progress on that trajectory. He could even possibly get up into that second tier. He is only 18, so he's got some time. But I'm really excited for what Nicholas Bodine's future has in store for us. Up next, we have Henri Jokiharju, who I got a picture with at the Blackhawks convention. No big deal. First round draft pick last year in 2017. 19 years old. A lot of people want him to take that next step and get to the NHL this year because of, well, the defensive woes that the Blackhawks had last year. Not quite sure if he's ready or if he needs a season in the AHL first. But Henri Jokiharju has a lot of expectations for him. And from what he's shown, he can be a very solid defenseman. And that is why I have him in tier number 3. He has the skills you want from a defenseman. We just don't quite know yet how they're going to translate in the NHL, but we think they should translate fairly well. Ian Mitchell had a very solid freshman season at the University of Denver. He was picked in the second round by the Hawks in 2017, but a lot of people feel like he may have been a first rounder that dropped to the second round. He is a guy that has a very, very good shot. Offensive defenseman type of player. If he continues to develop the way he has been, he's 19 years old, he could be a very solid defensive player for the Hawks. And rounding out the third tier, we have Victor Ejdsell, another guy we got in that Ryan Hartman trade from Nashville. And with how he's been playing so far alongside Nicholas Bodine, those two players can really make that trade look absolutely fantastic from the Hawks' perspective. Ejdsell absolutely lit it up for the Rockford Ice Hogs in the playoffs last year. He has had a solid summer so far in the prospect camp and the prospect tournament. It's going to be interesting to see how he does in training camp. He is 23 years old, but he's looked pretty darn good so far, and I'm excited to see what he can do with the Blackhawks for a full season. Moving on to tier number 4, these are prospects that should make the NHL and should be solid role players when they do make it. And in tier number 4, I have Artur Kalyamov, Chad Chris, Tim Soderlund, Blake Hillman, Matthew Highmore, Dominic Cahoon, and Colin Delia. Starting off with Artur Kalyamov, he's a player for Locomotive in the KHL, but we really got to know him or see what he's capable of because of his breakout performance in the World Juniors. He had such a great tournament, and it's that performance and the fact that he's a 20-year-old playing in the KHL, those two things that have him in tier 4 for me, because I think he has the ceiling and the ability to reach that solid role player if he makes the NHL squad with the Blackhawks. Next, we have Chad Chris, a second-round draft pick by the Hawks, a guy that is going to be a junior this upcoming season with Boston University. Improved quite well over his first 2 seasons in the NCAA. And unfortunately, though, is a guy that's kind of been dropped down the list just based on recent draft picks by the Hawks. He's kind of dropped down the blue line prospect depth chart. I still think he has the tools and the ability to be a solid final pairing defenseman. Whether that's with the Hawks or not will remain to be seen, but I think he has that ability. Tim Soderlund, forward out of Sweden, really broke out during the 2017 prospect camp for the Hawks, kind of wowed us with his play. Had a solid year for Sweden, helped the team win silver medal at the World Juniors. 20 years old, playing in the SHL. Quieted down quite a bit since then, but he still has the ability to develop into a solid role player, at least I think so, and that is why he is in tier number 4. Blake Hillman, defensive prospect, 22 years old, helped the University of Denver win a national championship, so he knows how to win. Played 4 games with the Blackhawks this past season. I don't think he'll make the team out of camp. There's just a lot of guys vying for defensive spots, but I think he can make the NHL and be a solid bottom pairing defenseman when his time comes, whether it's with the Blackhawks or somebody else. Next up, we have Matthew Highmore. Had a fantastic season in the AHL last year. It was just a scoring machine. Got called up for the Blackhawks for some games. It didn't really wow me, but that doesn't mean he can't eventually become a solid player, and that's why I have him in tier 4 here. I think he still can. I think he can still be a solid bottom 6 winger for the Hawks. Then you have Dominic Cahoon, who had a very solid prospect tournament. He also had a fantastic Olympics, helped the German national team win silver there. Very exciting, but unsure about how he's going to play in the NHL, how his game kind of translates over. But he's certainly someone who's going to be in the mix for a roster spot out of training camp. If he doesn't get a spot, though, he's probably going to be headed back to Germany. But if he does, I can definitely see him being a solid bottom 6 player for the Hawks. And then finally, to round out tier number 4, we have Colin Delia, who made his NHL debut with the Blackhawks the same game that Scott Foster made his NHL debut. Also got overshadowed because it was Seabrook's 1,000th game. But he showed flashes. Had a very good AHL season. That's kind of why he got called up to begin with. But obviously wasn't ready for the NHL. He is only 24 years old, and goalies tend to take a little bit longer to develop. Most goalies, at least. But he's a guy that I think if he continues to develop, he still has 3 or 4 years before he gets to the age that Crawford was when he took over the reins for the Hawks. I'm not saying he's going to be a Crawford-level goaltender, but he could be an everyday starter on an NHL team. He could be a solid starter. It's tough to say with goalies, though. They are tricky to guess how they develop. But I'm gonna make the jump and put him here in tier number 4. All right, moving on to tier number 5. These are prospects that have a solid chance of making the NHL. Not saying they will, but if they develop how they should make the NHL in some capacity. And in this tier, we have Nicholas Nordgren, Mackenzie Entwistle, Andre Altibarnik, I'm not even going to say that, Alexander Fortin, Dennis Gilbert, Lucas Carlson, Nathan Noel, Carl Dahlstrom, Luke Johnson, and Ivan Nalimov. Nicholas Nordgren, a winger playing in Liga, draft pick this year by the Hawks, a guy that is just a pure goal scorer, and a guy just has an innate sense to find the back of the net, and guys like that tend to find a way to make the NHL in some way, shape, or form, unless the rest of their game is absolutely atrocious. Mackenzie Entwistle, got him from Arizona in that Marian Hossa Hinostroza trade. He's had a solid prospect camp and tournament so far, but still a lot of unknowns with him. But it seems like he has the ability to possibly make the NHL roster at some point. He's 19 years old. He has plenty of time to develop. We're going to see how he does in training camp and this season, whether it's in the AHL or wherever. See how he develops. But right now, I'm going to throw him into tier number 5 here because he seems to have that potential. Next is Andre You know what? I'm just going to say Andre. 20 years old, bouncing between the KHL and the VHL. VHL being the minor league for Russia. He's kind of bouncing around those two leagues with SKA St. Petersburg. Described as a very high-energy, effort type of player. And at 20 years old, playing some action in the KHL, that's nothing to really joke about. If he continues his development, he could make a living in the NHL as a penalty kill specialist. Alexander Fortin, he always has a solid September, solid training camp. He had a very good prospect tournament for us this year. He'll probably have another good solid training camp, but he just can't seem to put it together to break into our roster. And at 21 years old, that's not really old, but he's been in our system long enough that he's kind of running out of time with the Hawks. And if he can't break the roster this year, his time might be over for the Hawks. He might need to find another team to find his way into the NHL. But I do think he has the ability to make it there and be a solid bottom six player. Next, we have Dennis Gilbert, who is a big, solid, strong, puck-moving defenseman. Played at Notre Dame. He will most likely be playing for the Rockford IceHogs this year. We'll see how he translates to the professional game, but he has the size to be a NHL caliber defenseman. But the prospect pool for the Hawks is just crowded with defensemen, and he's going to have to show something quite strong to break into the NHL with the Hawks. But he has the ability to do so. At least it looks like he does. Lucas Carlson, drafted in the 4th round in 2016 by the Hawks, 21 years old, playing over in the SHL, Sweden. He doesn't have super high upside, but he's a decent all-around defenseman. But it's quite crowded in defenseman land here in the Blackhawks prospect pool. And it's tough to tell where he really fits in, especially since he'll eventually need to switch from international ice to North American-sized ice. But I think he has the potential to be a bottom-pairing defenseman in the NHL at some point. Once again, whether or not that's with the Hawks or someone else, we'll have to wait and find out. But right now, he's on the Hawks, and he's a Hawks prospect, and I'm putting him in the 5th tier. Up next, we have Nathan Noel, another 4th round draft pick by the Hawks in 2016. He played a couple years in the Q, put up some solid numbers, but seemed to kind of stagnate a little bit, and that's really the concern with him. He certainly has the tools, but whether or not they translate to the NHL game, not quite sure. I think he can make it there, and that's why I have him in this tier. It just might take him a little bit longer than he would like or the Blackhawks would like. Carl Dahlstrom is freaking huge. If you've ever been to a Rockford IceHogs game and been down close to ice level, you'll realize just how big this kid is. Played a little bit with the Hawks this past year, but it was his first full season with the IceHogs after playing over in the SHL. So it's kind of a feeling out year. But he seemed to play well enough, obviously played well enough to get a call-up for the Hawks, and showed flashes. Showed some really good play, but inconsistent. I think with time, with development, he can improve and be a little bit more consistent, and eventually could make the NHL as more of a regular. Once again, though, and I've said this time and time again on this video, it's a very, very crowded prospect blue line for the Hawks. And we'll see if Dahlstrom is able to kind of rise above, or if he kind of tends to fall below with all these great, recent draft picks from the Hawks. Next is Luke Johnson, 23-year-old centerman, played for North Dakota, helped them win a national championship, had a pretty darn good year with the IceHogs this past season. If he has a good training camp here this year, he could be put on the short list of guys that could get a call-up during the season if there are injuries on the main roster for the Hawks. But it's all really going to depend on how he does in training camp and essentially how he does with Rockford. And finally, rounding out the 5th tier, we have Ivan Nalimov, a 24-year-old goaltender in the KHL. He's kind of an interesting prospect because, well, number one, he's a goaltender, so it's already tough to kind of predict how he's going to develop. But he also really only played in a half a season in the KHL. But he's in this tier because he had such great numbers in that half a season in the KHL. If he can continue that play this next season for a full year, he certainly could jump out of this 5th tier. If it shows that he was more of a fluke, he certainly could jump down and out of this 5th tier. It's very interesting, but for now, I have him here. All right, moving on to the sixth and final tier of this prospect pyramid. This is a tier that has no names because it is reserved for everyone else. Everyone who I did not name in the first 5 tiers fit in this tier. And it's not to say that they're bad at hockey or that they couldn't potentially be a great prospect for the Hawks. It's just that at this point, I just don't see them any higher than the 6th tier. So there you have it. That's it. That is my 2018 Chicago Blackhawks prospect pyramid. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you agree, disagree with things or players, their positions, let me know down in the comments section below. Like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate that as always. But most importantly, stay safe, make good decisions. We're halfway through September, which means we've almost made it to hockey season. We're almost there. And with that in mind, see you next time.